Hey everybody, welcome to Pink Shade. It's Mary Payne here, and I'm very excited about my very special guest. I have Olivia Plath. Everybody knows Olivia from Welcome to Plathville. As you guys know, I have covered this show, episode 1, season 1. We've covered it on our regular feed, and I believe we've also been covering it over on Pink Shade Prime the last couple of seasons. So if you want to hear the episodes, the recaps that we've done, that's where it is. And listen, Olivia's been our hero from day one. From day one. And Olivia, we say all the time, Amy Archer, who has a podcast called Little Miss Recap, she recaps it with me. And we've been saying since day one, we believe in your love with Ethan. We did realize at some point that we were the only ones, but we didn't even believe it when we heard the rumors you guys were separating. We did not believe it. We're like, it's not going to happen. But then it did. But we understand. We understand. How are you feeling now that this season has ended?
I think when this season started airing, honestly, like Ethan and I had separated long before, and we needed some private time to like figure things out on our end before we announced it publicly. We didn't want his family to know at first, and also like there was some show timelines that we had to
Yeah, of course.
like go along with. So when the season started airing, I felt like I was in such a place in my life where I was feeling great, and I had moved to Los Angeles, and I was like healing and digging through a lot of things in my life. And I felt like I had kind of moved on and found some closure. And then everything airing again, I was like, oh no, it's going to like open it all back up. How am I going to move on? But then now the season's done airing, and I just feel really relieved that like it's caught up to date.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, I feel like I can kind of just like let out a long sigh of relief.
Because now everything's out. And
Yeah.
even when Micah was on Watch What Happens Live, which is just like all my worlds crossing, right? Because I cover Bravo and I cover TLC, and I was like, oh, weird, Micah. Even when he was on Watch What Happens Live, and he was sort of like, you'll see what happens, and then I think it was around that day. You know what? You guys had announced your separation, but they had pre-recorded that Watch What Happens Live. So when they asked him about it, he was still pretending like you guys were together, but then like it had already come out. So I was like, oh, that was bad timing on Bravo's part. But he was still sort of towing that line of like, well, I don't know what's going to happen. And I was thinking like, oh, and then now he knew. But
I
I
mean,
bet you do feel relieved that like your announcement, everything is caught up to where the show is, and now it's kind of over and you can
yeah.
free talk. Yeah.
Yeah. I think also like Ethan's family, they did not know that we were not together for a really long time purposefully, because we just didn't want those opinions and figuring out how to disentangle our lives and move forward. And then even when they knew, they didn't know a lot of details. So even Micah saying that, I'm like, listen, Ethan and I's relationship was super rocky. This is not the first time we weren't together. So as far as I'm concerned, like he doesn't know all the details and probably didn't even then and didn't really know what he was talking about. And that's fine. That's his opinion on things.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a real people use the term 180 and 360 wrong a lot, but with
Yeah.
specifically Moriah and Micah, it does seem they did a 360. They did go back to where they started. you know,
Yeah. Yeah. That
which
was
is
quite shocking.
shocking, very shocking. And Mariah's point sort of when she had that talk with Ethan in Malibu when she was there on business, which is weird. But they're talking, and she's saying like I was 16 and all this, but Ethan's point was so valid. Of right, but mom kicked you out of the house and you left. It had nothing to do with Olivia. You were already on this path with disagreeing with mom and wanting to be this free bird to fly way before Olivia came along. It had nothing to do with Olivia. So you can't like blame your bad relationship with mom, or now it's great, on Olivia. And I don't know if she like heard that or took that in. Her whole thing is like, well, I was 16 and now I'm older. But I was like, yeah, but you can't blame that on Olivia. You were already flying the coop.
Yeah. Honestly, it's going to be super interesting looking forward. Because I think that in the last year, they all kind of decided that like they were great before I came along. And then chaos and havoc, and it obviously has to be all my fault. And
It
I
just
think
can't
it'll be
be that
really
way.
interesting. It'll be really interesting moving forward to see like who gets blamed for the dysfunction because it ain't gonna be me anymore,
Yeah, that's right.
or
So if
maybe
there's
it will
any,
be from afar.
it'll be like, yeah, she did because she came into our lives. Like I'm like, it's very, very interesting, right? Like I feel like at least with Micah having lived in LA and seen some things, and become friends with people that are of grew up differently from him, different sexual persuasions and all this, and different ethnicities and stuff. That perhaps Micah at least has a little bit of more of a worldview. But then again, he was just sort of like, I want to get back to the farm. I was like, I mean, and
Yeah,
I don't think his modeling career is like super blowing up and probably could support his lifestyle. But at the least, you're like, really? After all that work you did and you went out in the world and now you want to, there's nothing wrong with going back, but do you want to live
yeah.
there? You
I mean,
know?
I somewhat get it. Growing up in a very fundamental world, it's a lot of hard work to leave because you basically have to question your entire foundation of life, everything
Hmm.
you've ever been taught to believe, down to the smallest thing. I Here's an example. I was recently at a friend's house and we were talking about like fossils or something, and the topic of evolution came up, and they were like, "Well, the Earth is like whatever million years old." And I didn't even know what to say. I kind of froze in the moment because I was like, yeah, about that. I don't know what I believe. Because I was taught the earth was like 6,000 years old and like evolution is a lie, but I don't believe in that anymore. But I don't know the science to back up someone else's point of view because I wasn't taught that in school. So I don't
Right.
believe. And it's down to the smallest thing like that where you just feel like your whole life is upended. And I have some siblings who I thought were going to walk away from the fundamental world and those very, very conservative values, and they ended up going back. And I see that with, the Plath family as well. Like the kids got out and experienced a little bit of life, and it was really, really hard. Asking questions is hard, especially if you've been taught to sweep things under the rug. And they all went back because it was easier. And look, I don't agree with how I was treated in the process, but I understand where they're coming from. I understand it's an easier path to take, and it's not an uncommon one for kids coming out of fundamentalism.
That's interesting, right? Because you grew up with a lot of siblings
Yes,
also.
I had 9 siblings.
Okay. So, like the Plass, there were 10 total. And then, of course, the Plass had a brother that tragically passed away. So, and how many of your siblings are you in touch with?
Um, So the parallels between my family and the Plath family are like so weird. We grew up in
Yeah.
the same world, went to the same family conferences. They
Yeah.
had a brother die. I've now had a brother die. We have some
Mm.
siblings with the same names. Um,
Yeah, that's true.
and I am currently very close to one of my younger sisters, Lydia.
Yes.
Um, I have a pathway of communication with my younger brother, Nathan, who was on the show for a small point, but he is one of the kids that kind of went back um,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
my parents. And so that communication is very sparse.
Yeah. It's interesting that you're saying this, that you understand it so well, because you could probably see a world where I could do that too, because it's easier.
Oh my gosh, literally this morning I was going back through my camera roll looking for a camera, not for a camera, looking for a photo. And I was way back in like 2018, the year I got married, and I was looking at all the photos I took during that time going, wow, it would have been really easy to stay that naive and
Yeah.
just ignore everything and just keep my head down to where it was. Like I almost looked back at pictures of 20-year-old me with a little bit of longing, like, oh, she didn't realize how easy she had it. But then I remembered that like I wasn't in a place of asking questions then. And naivety might be blissful.
Hmm.
Um, but that's not the kind of life I actually want to live. I want to ask questions and I want to find answers. And it comes with its own hardships.
It's interesting thinking about that and thinking about Mariah specifically and how we saw so much of how she pushed against it. And even to the point of like, she's supposed to be helping in the kitchen with Lydia and Lydia was doing everything. I mean, Lydia, I was always like, she's always like, Cinderella, Cinderella, wash the house, clean that, she's everything. And Mariah wouldn't help her. And that was very upsetting to Lydia because it was all on Mariah for some reason. I'm not sure what Kim was doing. But so Mariah pushed against that so hard, and now we see her in her own apartment. She literally does not know how to open a package of bacon. She doesn't know how to like barely make a cup of coffee. So I'm like, so she's sort of going back to this lifestyle, but does she want a husband that will be eventually like Ethan? Like, when are you going to cook me a meal when she can't even open a package of bacon? So I don't quite understand like how she thinks that's. and I know you can't speak for her, but how does she think that's going to work if she wants to go back to that lifestyle? But as far as that goes, she's no Lydia.
Mhm.
She's no happy homemaker.
Yeah, I think that honestly, I also kind of understand Mariah's rebellion because I look at when I was 18, 19, 20, and I thought I was rebelling by cutting my hair short. And I thought I was
Mm,
rebelling by not adhering to the dress standards that I grew up with. And I thought
mm,
that I was like a rebel and thinking for myself by, eating whatever food I wanted or going to a country music concert, whatever it was. And I realize now that like oftentimes when you don't know how to do the deep inner work, you project it onto the outward. So I didn't know how
mm.
to ask a lot of questions deep inside. So I just changed the outside. I changed what I could. And I
Yeah,
look
that
at
makes
Mariah and I
sense.
see the same thing of like, it's too hard to question the entire foundation of everything, but I can just change the outside. I can change the surface level. I can wear what I want and do what I want and listen to what I want. Um, and I can justify it with, various means. But yeah, again, I understand where those kids are coming from. It didn't make the end of my friendship with them any easier, but I
Yeah.
understand it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You can change the outside super easy, but it's not so
Mm-hmm.
easy to change the inside. Well, back to that conversation that we saw Ethan and Mariah have, and we know just from watching Ethan all this time, it's super hard for him to have any kind of deep conversation or really sort of vocalize what he's standing up for. And he was talking to Mariah, and he did stand up for you, and he, was reminding her, you had these problems with Kim, which is so weird. Every time they call their mom Kim or my parent, it's I mean, he's like, so what's Kim's apartment doing? Like, you mean your mom? Or he'll be speaking to Micah, and he'll go, well, when I was talking to my dad, I was like, it's also Micah's dad, like not
I think
just
there's a lot of emotional detachment in that family. So in that sense, that language makes sense.
okay, because I'm not the only one that's noticed this. People are like, why
No.
do they do that? They when they're speaking to each other, they'll say, my mother this, and I'm like, it's also their mother. So why not just say
Mm-hmm.
mom? But anyway, that's a sidebar. So when Ethan was talking to Mariah, he reminded her, that she had problems with Kim way before you came along. And he also reminded her, he really, I thought, was really hammering home this thing about the music, about you not obviously trying to steal her music or get her $12 from Spotify or whatever it was. And he says, so what were you doing in the kitchen? And she's like, I don't remember that at all. And then she says later in her like talking head, she goes, that just didn't happen. And I'm like, did she, because she said, if it did happen, I would have the password somewhere. I was like, well, maybe you just didn't write it down,
Mm-hmm.
But I was in those moments so proud of Ethan for being like, we may not be together and we may getting divorced and all that, but I'm still going to stand up for these are things that happened. And I'm not going to let you call Olivia a thief,
Mm-hmm.
blame her for when you split from the family because it had nothing to do with Olivia. So in those cases with Ethan, and we really took a turn on Ethan, which was terrible. But in those cases, we were like, he's doing the right thing here by his, wife, former wife, soon to be ex-wife, whatever. I mean, did you feel that when you watched it because you were watching it with us along with the rest of us?
I was made aware, like at the time that that was filmed, I was made aware that he had my back, and
Mm,
I don't know if he did that for me or if he did that for
mm,
truth's sake. I'm not quite
right.
sure. I know Ethan as a person is like he's no BS a lot of times. Also no emotions, no drama, nothing like that. So for him
Yeah.
it's really easy to look at a situation and completely tune out any emotions of the situation and just say, "Nope, here are the hard cold facts." And
Okay.
I know that like he would have had anyone's back, so to speak, in the situation with Mariah if she was telling a lie about anyone, because that's Ethan. He stands up for what he believes is the truth. And he is usually right when it comes to situations like that. So yeah, I'm not really sure why he had my back, but I am glad that he did with his family, especially. I mean, I know that like kind of went in one ear and out the other with them, and
Yeah.
there was no like reconciliation or apologies or anything like that. But yeah, I'm at least glad that he stood up for the truth.
Yeah, because I mean, he's not going to let people say that you were out there trying to steal. Listen. if she was like Beyonce and you were some sort of financial genius, like we'd be talking about a different thing. But this was just a password for people that had downloaded her song. But she
Well,
did
it's also
apologize.
why,
Yeah,
oh, sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you go.
No, I was just gonna say, it's also why I didn't talk a lot about the music scandal, whatever, on the show, because to
Yeah.
me it was so laughable that I
Hmm.
was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, what? And I was like, listen, sometimes you gotta let people like take care of themselves. Sometimes you gotta let people like show their own true colors, and you don't need to talk trash about them because it makes you look bad.
Yes.
So when it came to the
Yes.
music thing, I was like, I don't feel any need to talk about this because that's so ridiculous. And the more that she talks about it, the more it's going to prove that it's not true. Inconsistencies are going to show.
Hmm.
Um, and that was my mindset originally going into it. I did do one small interview about what happened because they asked for my side of the story, and I was like, well, okay, I guess it's helpful to hear some facts. And then seeing the whole thing edited and come together, I'm really glad that Ethan did talk more about it because I honestly thought it was so silly it would blow over, and it didn't. Like it was brought up the whole season long, which shocked me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I didn't talk more about it because I was like, that is so stupid. I actually can't even fathom that.
Yeah, and I think that that was a good tactic to take. And speaking of that, when the whole story came out last season with you, which my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, the production asked you like, what was initially the problem that you had with Kim? And you
Mm-hmm.
explained that initially the problem was when you first got married, you and Ethan were combining your finances, and you kind of became aware there was a credit card or something that you didn't have any kind of password or access to the account, and it turned out it was an account that he either had with his mom or shared with his mom or was sharing money with his mom. And it had something to do with an MLM and like a downline. And she was
Yes.
sort of taking his money from a downline. And you said to Kim, like, hey, now we're married. I need the passwords and I need to be in charge of this. And she didn't like that because then she wasn't going to be benefiting from that.
Yeah. So back in season 4, um, when everything kind of started unraveling with my relationship with Mike and Moriah, at that time they kept saying over and over again, like, but our mom has changed. Like, why can't you get over it? Why can't you have a relationship with her? And they were almost like forgetting why they didn't originally have a relationship with her.
Yeah,
And I
right.
was asked during an interview, like, okay, we've heard snippets for 4 or 5 years now. Can you actually give us some concrete? Why don't you want a relationship with this person? And I was
Hmm.
like, honestly, mm, the issues in her and I relationship started before the credit card thing. It started before I got married, but that was like a solid example I could give that everybody I thought would understand of
Yeah.
taking advantage of your minor child in an MLM downline and taking money and product from them and not repaying them.
Hmm.
I was like, that's not the first issue I had with her, but that's one that a lot of people will be able to understand
Yeah.
and say, oh, I get it. And so I shared that story in an interview, honestly, not thinking you would even be included because a lot of things like that were not included. And I thought if it was, it wouldn't be in its entirety. But it was included and
Mm.
caused a really big blow up with Ethan's family. They were very, very upset that I was allowed to share that story.
Well, it's so interesting about that particular story because I've watched you also did like a long form TikTok where you explained it
Mm-hmm.
very, very detailed. And Ethan has 100% said that is all true. That did happen. And we saw when you guys started season 5, you were in Paris and you were saying, we sat down when this first happened, the four of us, you and Ethan and Kim and Barry, and we discussed it. We worked it out amongst us. The four of us know what happened in that conversation and we moved on. But the problem they had with it was that you told it, I guess. So then everybody just starts 100% denying that it even happened. And you and
Mm-hmm.
Ethan are like, it did happen. It 100% happened. And Ethan on that car ride with Micah, Micah was mentioning it, and Ethan's like, it did happen exactly as Olivia said it, and as we were all there. And so then it was one of the first, I think it may have been the first episode of season 1. Kim was asked about it, and she just said, no, I don't need to defend myself against that. I was like, actually, you do, because it's pretty bad, you know?
If you're going to pick one thing to defend
Yeah.
yourself on, if you
Yeah.
actually didn't commit fraud, you probably would defend yourself on that. I
And
don't
I found,
know. It's just my
I
two
mean, I
cents.
think that was really telling for those of us looking at it from a critical eye, I thought that was really telling that she would just say, "No, I'm not going to respond." Like, "You're not? What?" You know? That was wild. But I will say
Yeah.
that back to that conversation in Malibu when Mariah and Ethan were talking, and she said, "I will only apologize for overreacting about the Spotify account or whatever. I did overreact." And I think it seems to me that what happens was she went to log in, realized she didn't know the password. You guys are in Europe. You're on a huge time zone difference. She can't get in touch with you maybe 10 hours and just freaked out and decided to pretend like she's going to sue you over it. Like
Well,
it just seemed very knee jerk, you know?
yeah, yeah. So Ethan and I were like in Europe for our last 2 weeks of like the 2.5 months we were there. And Mariah sent out this like big family text about how she was so tired of me being allowed to talk poorly about her family on the show. It wasn't my show, it was her family show. And she was going to have to take public measures to make it right. And the next couple hours later, the next day, she posted that statement on Instagram, and Micah and Lydia and Isaac all did as well, saying that I lied about their mom. The credit card story wasn't true. So that happens, and Ethan and I are like, let's just ignore it. We have like 2 weeks left, a week and a half. We'll get home and deal with it. And then we hear from my brother Nathan in Tampa that Mariah just moved out, didn't talk to anyone. She had bills that she still owed. Um, at that time, I sent out a text because Mike and Mariah were on my phone plan, reminding them that they owed me for their phone bill and that I was going to be
Wow.
discontinuing it, and that they were responsible to find their own phone plan. And never heard back from them. They didn't acknowledge that at all. Finally, Mariah answered a few days later and was like, I actually don't owe you money for the phone. And I was like, you do. Here's the statements. And then the next day, not having answered that, she texted me and was like, "Hey, what's the password to the account?" And at that point, I had a week left in Europe, and I was like, "I am not dealing with this. Like, I will deal with this when I get back to the States." So a week passed. I get back to the States, and I get an email saying that I stole the music and she was going to take me to court. And she actually said she was going to sue me in court. Um, and I read this email on a Friday afternoon. I had guests staying in my home, like just got back from Europe, had guests staying in my home. I read this email and I was like, I don't even know what to do with this right now. I'll have to deal with that on Monday. The next day, Ethan gets a text. Hey, Ethan, not to put you in the middle, but I sent this email to Olivia and she never replied to me. And I was like, oh, I guess I have to do this now on her timeline. So Sunday, I sit down and spend hours going through like account records and financial records and downloading everything and taking screenshots of when accounts were created and when I gave her information, and like sent it all her way. So she had everything, gave her back every file. Basically just washed my hands of the whole thing. But yeah, the timeline is just like so laughable. Um, I literally can't. I
And
literally
then you
can't.
feel like I'm doing all this about a Spotify account that again, I don't know if she's making millions of dollars from it, but
No.
as an independent artist, I can't imagine. I don't know. It just seems like it was so important to do it like right that minute. And then
Yeah.
when the whole family put out that post about you and the credit card thing and the Kim, I was like, did they pull some Plaths out of the back room to like create Instagram accounts? Like, who are all these accounts posting this thing? Like, what? It was,
Yeah, just like
it was,
posting that and then expecting me to answer immediately on vacation, and then not answering immediately on vacation and being told that I was going to be sued for something that I did all of the work for. Um,
but
when
they're going to
Mariah
sue
first
you for
wanted.
what? For not giving Mariah the correct password? Like, that doesn't, I mean, that
And the
doesn't even
thing
make
is,
sense.
I didn't even feel the need to answer right away because I was like, you already had the password. Like, I went over all this
Right.
before I left for Europe. So if you forgot, it's not on me to answer you within 24 hours to get it back to you.
Right.
I'm traveling internationally and then I'm coming home and I immediately have guests in my home. Like, I will get back to you when I get back to you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I also definitely felt that way because they had to release the statement. And I was like, I'm not just about to bend over backwards and like just do everything.
Right. After you
I
had made
I've
this
done enough.
horrible statement about me.
I've
Yeah.
done enough for everyone.
Yeah, it is wild that like, with Ethan with backing you up and then Mariah leaving and Micah leaving and then coming back and all this, it just seems like Kim Plath might be like the best cult leader ever. Like I don't it's fascinating to watch, especially where Kim is these days and everything that she talked about for so many years and we saw it from season 1 up until mid season 4. no technology, no alcohol, only vegan food. Like you never can't have ice cream. And if you let my kids have ice cream, then you're banned from our house. And you've got the problem because you let the kids have ice cream and you had a beer in front of the children and you're a 21-year-old adult. And all these judgment things that she had against you and for a good amount of time for Mariah and Micah too. Not Micah. They seemed to, whatever he did was fine, but seemed to have it so hard against you. And now Kim is not only doing all the same things, she's doing them on a big level, like
Mhm.
living in sin with a man and getting a DUI and leaving your husband and doing all these things. And even in season 4, like we joked around, like, did she go to Costco and get a 10-for-1 deal on skirts? Because she is out here in the streets in a skirt and a tank top.
Was
Yet,
it a skirt or just a skirt?
well, we thought it was skirts. We thought it was skirts. You think it was just straight up skirts. Unwrap the first of many presents this season with holidays on the house from DraftKings Casino. With hundreds of games, prizes, and promos, DraftKings Casino has everything on your list. Right now, new players who play $5 get $100 instantly in casino credits. What are you waiting for? Cozy up with all the classes like slots, blackjack, and roulette, or play exclusive games you'll only find at DraftKings Casino to feel the holiday cheer all season long. Download the DraftKings Casino app now and sign up with promo code PINKSHADE and play $5 to get $100 in casino credits. That's promo code PINKSHADE only at DraftKings Casino. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. 21 and over. Physically present in Connecticut, Michigan, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia only. Void in Ontario. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. One per opted in new customer. $5 wager required. Max $100 in casino credit awarded, which require one-time playthrough within 7 days. Terms at casino.draftkings.com/holidays on the house. Restrictions apply. But we're always like, she's out here in her skirts and tank tops, but let's roll back to when she would be like mad at Mariah for wearing shorts and like a spaghetti strap.
Mhm.
It just, the hypocrisy of it, I can't imagine us as viewers, but I can't imagine for you like living in it. And I can't even imagine for her own kids that they wouldn't be like, wait, our whole lives we were taught this way, but now because you want to change, it's okay?
Yeah, that's all very, very confusing to me. I
Yeah,
think I am more confused than her own kids are. Um,
right. Yeah,
I look back at, like, being an 18, 19-year-old, and getting ready to get married to Ethan and, like, how harshly I was judged.
it seems like you were close to Kim at that time, though.
So, I met Kim when I was 16 years old. Our families both went to this large, conference run by Michael and Debbie Pearl. Whole other tangent.
Is
And
that the
at
same as the Bill Goddard, the Duggars? Is that the same
it's
organization?
in the same world. It's not the exact same organization, but it's within the same world of fundamental Christianity.
Okay.
And yeah, so our families met at that conference. I was 16 years old. At the time, they were not doing music. My family was doing music, and Kim was fascinated by our family doing music on the main stage and was like, I want to do that with my kids. And she was asking my mom, like, how do you make a business out of this? How do you make money off your
Hmm.
kids doing music? Like,
Yeah.
very Kim Plath questions. And my mom was like, well, I mean, my kids love playing music, so that helps. And then she learned that I was interested in like web design, so she got my contact info and went back home. And at that point, hired me to make a website for her family band where they started playing music and like promoting. And she really wanted like a show, or like some
Wow.
kind of public avenue to kind of like show off her kids and her parenting and all that stuff. And
So
that's
you were
how.
allowed in your house. You were allowed in your house to have computers because what we saw with the Plaths is they had the one family computer that Kim had the password to.
That's what we had, was one family computer. But once you were like 13 years old, you got an allotted time per day. So like you got like 30 minutes a day to be on the family computer. It was in
Okay.
the living room. Everyone could see what was going on, so you really couldn't get into a lot of trouble. But we were
Mm.
allowed to like email some friends back and forth, or I used to love writing, and I would just like type up my stories and my Word documents. So
Yeah.
I started by building a family website for her. And at that point, I was not in a great place with my parents. I kind of wanted out of the fundy world, and I didn't know what that looked like, but I just was not really happy with my parents, and they were very strict. And also, just there was not a good emotional connection there from the time I was young. And I think Kim sensed that. And also, she
Mm.
was looking for someone to connect with. And so she very quickly befriended me. And I was like 16 at this point, and I was getting calls or emails from her almost every day. She started writing me letters. It was just a lot. It was
That
a
is
lot.
weird. That
It
is
was
weird.
looking back, it was very weird, talking to a grown woman like that every day. She would just call me up, talk to me for like an hour or something, send me letters in French. Yeah, very weird, very weird. And she knew Ethan was interested in me and would
Mm.
do all she could to kind of like orchestrate that and make sure
Hmm.
we got to spend time together. She would like call my mom up and be like, hey, we're all coming to see you for a week. And they would just arrive and camp out at our house for a week. And she really wanted Ethan and I to be together. So our relationship started like that, like very intense, almost too much, kind of like a little bit of love bombing. And in the
Mm.
very beginning, I was so hungry for a mom and I just went along with everything. Um,
Yeah.
and then by the time Ethan and I were engaged, she started doing some things that really overstepped. We were buying a house, we had the house under escrow, and she called up our realtor to like invite herself into our house to check it out for us, make sure there was no bad spirits without talking to us first, things like that. Where I told Ethan, I was like, there's some boundaries that have got to be put in place with your mom. Like, she's just overstepping, especially with wedding planning. I would say I wanted something, but because the wedding was on her farm, she would veto it and then go do something else behind my back. And I was just like, there's got to be some boundaries in place. And when we started putting boundaries in place, that's when everything started to fall apart with her.
Yeah. That's what it sounds like. She wanted to be in charge. And if that included your relationship, it included your relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Was she
Yeah.
like that with the older sister Hosanna that we only saw like one time for a second on that first episode? Was she the same way with her?
Um, she was definitely like overbearing, but Hosanna welcomed it. Her and Hosanna were very, very close. And I specifically remember one time she told me, she was like, well, everyone knows Hosanna's perfect. And I looked at her and I
Oh.
was like, I don't think so. And she was like, well, more perfect than me and you are ever going to be. And I was like, okay.
Well, that's really weird. Well, I mean, one of the things that sticks out for a lot of people that watched it from the beginning is when she says that Hosanna's super talented. I don't know if she was singer or if it was violin. I can't remember. I think that we saw her sing
Yeah,
some.
she plays the violin.
And she says she's super talented and she got scholarship offers for college, but we decided she didn't need the head learning. And people are like,
Yeah, I think she'd
what?
gotten a scholarship for like some smaller Christian college.
Yeah.
And like the head guy there really, I don't know, interesting vibes. An older like Christian gentleman really liked her and wanted to give her like let her come to that little Christian college for free. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, Barry and Kim did not believe in college for their kids, especially the girls. Very much like my parents. My brothers went to college, but none of us girls did.
But Barry and Kim both went to college. So why wouldn't they
Yeah,
want the same for their
ironically,
kids?
both of my parents went to college. Ironic that you like wouldn't want to open the same doors for your kids. I think, it's especially when it comes to raising girls, the mindset is like, well, they're gonna get married and they're gonna have kids and they're gonna be home, so why do they need a college degree?
Right.
Also, the preacher, teacher, whatever, Michael Pearl, the conference that Ethan and his family has met at, he specifically would teach these seminar sermons on how it's better for girls to get married young because they haven't made up their own mind about things yet and they're more moldable. It's easier for them to submit when they're younger.
Mm.
And college teaches women to like basically buck God's design and think for themselves too much. And then they're too ornery when they get married later on, and they have a lot of trouble submitting. So don't let your
Mm.
girls go to college and have them married young, and they'll make much better wives. And those are
Right.
teachings both of our parents subscribe to.
And it seems like at the end of the last episode of season 5 that Ethan was saying to you, like, don't you think maybe you could go back to that, maybe just a little, just a little. And you're
More than
like,
a little.
you're like, no. And it was very interesting where you said, cooking a meal doesn't equate love. And he says it's one of the ways to a man's heart is through his stomach. Okay. That's true. And he does say sometimes men and women are just, maybe like women are more nurturing and men are more work outside the home. And those are sort of traditional roles. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's also true. But
Hmm.
the two of you had sort of built a life where you weren't really doing that. And it seemed to be you were agreeing on it until he sort of, again, not a 180, but a 360, seemed to kind of be going back to where he came from. And when you said to him, when he said, when's the last time you cooked a meal? I think all the women of the world felt such like, when's the last time you cooked a fucking meal? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, what? You cook a meal for me. We both have jobs,
Yeah.
It was, I wanted to throw something at my television, and he was sort of saying to you, you should go back to these ideals that oppressed you. And it's like, are you new here? This is not what we're doing. We have
Yeah.
seen the world. We've gone out. We've seen how it can be. I don't have to go back to these ideals that oppress me.
Actually,
But
the funny thing is in that interview, and this didn't make it in because that interview was like an hour more,
it
and
looked so
it gets
miserable. It looked
it gets
so
cut
miserable.
down. But when
Yeah.
he said like everyone knows one of the only ways to a man's heart is through his stomach. Sorry, I know this all like by heart. It's
Yeah.
stored in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
brain from sitting there. Ironically enough, one thing that didn't make it in is I said back to him, I was like, what if it's one of the ways to a woman's heart? I like food too. You don't
Right.
cook for me. Why is it my job to cook for you and make money and do all these things? Like, no, I'm not interested in going back to a fundamental view of what a woman is. It's not for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. And it seemed to me that Micah, when he went to California, became a little like the most open-minded. He seemed to be more aligned sort of with how you think. And that's why it's so maddening that they all did their own thing, but somehow it's like it seems to me that they're trying to turn you into the cult leader when really to me it seems like Kim was always the cult leader. And even Ethan said that when he had that fight in the driveway with his dad, he said, "You're the neck that turns the head." Like we all know that. And Barry just stands there like, "Dun, dun, dun, I don't know.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
I said this a lot over the years, when I just didn't I the dysfunction was too much for me, and I would always just say, "Not my circus, not my money, not my monkeys." And that
Mhm.
has even more of a meaning now after this
Right.
last, few episodes have aired, but I still stand
Yeah.
by that. Not my circus and not my monkeys. It's
Yeah.
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 I can't
Well,
begin to understand it all, so I don't try.
what do you think when Ethan, when you were having those conversations on the couch, that what do you think Ethan means by saying he didn't feel regarding your morals that you didn't have love of God or country? I mean, first of all, that's so insulting to be like, to say that you don't love God or country, and you may not believe in the same kind of God he does, but everybody can believe what they want. Um,
Mhm.
and he specifically felt that it was a moral issue. Like, did he think you're gonna teach your children witchcraft when he wasn't around? Like, I didn't understand
No.
that.
No, the more I started deconstructing, the more vocal I became about the kind of world that I want to live in and that I want my kids to live in. And that is a world where they can choose their sexuality and gender. That is a world where they don't have to believe that America is the greatest country on earth. They can live wherever they want and see the good that any place has to offer. That's a world
Mhm.
where they don't get indoctrinated to be a Christian from the time they're a little kid, that they get to choose for themselves what they want to believe. They have the options presented and they're taught critical thinking, and then they get to choose for themselves. It's a world where I want them well educated outside the home. And all of those things are incredibly threatening to a very conservative lifestyle, which, if that's how someone wants to live, like I personally see problems with it. I was raised that way and I didn't have autonomy. So I'm obviously going to have an issue with it. But at the end of the day, like if that's how Ethan wants to live, that's how Ethan wants to live. And I think I was in denial for a long time. And I always told him, like, look, we're night and day when it comes to politics. I
Mhm.
would consider myself very open-minded and progressive. I would consider myself an ally to the LGBTQ plus community. I would consider myself, pro-education. I would consider myself more democratic or liberal. And that was starkly different from him. And I think I was in denial for a long time. I always said, we can believe different things and make it work. Our kids will see different options of what to believe. But
In a perfect world, that's how it is.
in
You
a
could have
perfect
different
world, yeah,
beliefs. Yeah, yeah.
it's not a perfect world. Um, and when it actually came down to it, I realized that like there's no way I could have a kid in an environment where I thought they wouldn't be fully loved and accepted for
Mhm.
exactly who they are. And they wouldn't be allowed to make up their own mind about who they want to be and what life is going to look like for them.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I wondered a bit if because I follow your photography because you're a gorgeous photographer and you seem to do a lot of weddings and you've
Mhm.
done many gay weddings and I wondered if Ethan really had a problem with you.
Yep.
Whether or not he has problem with gay people, he may not want to take that extra step of like, but gay people should get married. And then also maybe you shouldn't promote it by taking their photos. I was kind of thinking that was the
Yes, that was a very big point of contention.
yeah, but
Also, I think like where
yeah.
things are in the world right now, a lot of things are much more polarizing than they maybe used to be. So in the last year, what we had like Roe v. Wade overturned. We've
Mhm.
had racism really surface and people start to look deeper. We've had a lot of global issues where people are actually starting to question things. And so I think that in a time when our relationship was already, we were growing apart, having all these things come up and having these conversations all the time really highlighted how differently we approach things.
Mhm.
Where I believe that, like, abortion is healthcare, and I believe that like LGBTQ plus people should have the exact same rights as everyone else. And
Yes.
it just, yeah, it got to a point it was way too polarizing. And I think I was in denial, calling it quits for a long time. But on this side of things, I can see that it was absolutely the best thing.
When your sister came on the show and her name is, Lydia Grace, like my name is Mary Payne, so I'm like, "Oh, I love a double name." When she came on the show, it seemed like people were like, "Oh, like she's gonna like be a voice of reason," and then you were a little bit pushing back with her regarding your marriage because she would say like, do you really want to live like this? And this is only what we're seeing on the show. I understand
Mm-hmm.
your relationship with your sister is private, but on the show, it seemed like she really, when you kind of reconnected with her, that she really sort of opened your eyes more so just because she's seeing it as someone who's known you your whole life as an outsider coming in. And was that the case when you kind of became closer again with your sister? Oops.
I think in the beginning, when I reconnected with my sister, I was so aware of how Ethan talked to his siblings about me and how that affected my marriage at the
Hmm.
time. And I wanted to be so careful to not to do the same thing with my sister. I didn't want to
Right.
bring her in the middle. I didn't want to tell her everything. I didn't want to loop her in. And if she pushed too far, then I'd be like, hey, I don't really want to talk about this. Like that's my marriage kind of thing.
Yes.
One thing that opened my eyes though was when they visited for Christmas, and as this played out on the show, the whole donut incident, where I wanted to get out of the car and Ethan didn't let me, and he was still doing donuts when I asked him to stop.
That scared me to
I
death. I hate that. I'm a big baby. I don't do roller coasters or anything, and that kind of thing scares me to death. And I know this is boys because I grew up in the deep South in Mississippi, so that's just a thing the guys do, and they think it's fun to go mudding. Not for me. It
well,
scares me
yeah.
so bad.
You should probably take into account if your passengers want to be in the car doing that or not, and
Right.
especially with Ethan. Like I have been in several bad car accidents before. One was when I was really young. My mom was driving. Another one was with Ethan, and he flipped the car that he and I were in. And it was a terrible accident. The cops told us if we hadn't had our seatbelts on, we would have died. Like, so I've already been in a very bad accident where he was driving, and to not listen to me.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, my sister never looked at me and was like, are you okay being treated that way? What opened my eyes was that I was mortified to have that happen in front of her
Yeah.
and for her to see the kind of treatment I accepted for myself. That was the biggest eye opener, was going, I'm embarrassed that someone else is watching me accept this kind of treatment, because it
Hmm.
it was like my eye opening of like, oh, I must think that I'm like not worth more if I put up with this, and that's
Hmm.
embarrassing for my younger sister to see. Um, Honestly, that was
Yeah.
like one of the biggest eye openers.
So it wasn't her saying it to you verbally. It's more like just having her around. You're like, oh, I'm now seeing it how she probably sees
Yeah, I'm
it.
like I'm her older sister, and I'm accepting poor treatment in a relationship, and she's watching. that's kind of embarrassing. It means I think
Yeah.
that little of myself.
Okay, I have a really random question. Just talking about your
Yeah.
sister reminded me. Okay, so a few seasons back when Lydia Plath had an evil cell phone and she was texting a boyfriend on her cell phone, which was keeping her from her duties of cleaning homes. This
Hmm.
is you guys, I'm not making this up. This is what happened on the show.
Yeah.
So she was supposed to be cleaning homes and she would text her boyfriend as a teenage girl will do. Text your boyfriend because it's exciting.
Hmm.
Okay, the rumor out there in the world was that that boyfriend was one of your brothers.
Yeah, I don't know all of the details of who she was texting. I can't claim to know that.
Okay.
What I can say is that she had a crush on my younger brother Nathan, and he had had one on her for a few years. And on the show, when she talks about like praying and giving up her crush on a boy, that was about my brother. I do know that.
Wow. And then we saw Nathan on the show.
Hmm.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. So now I want to switch over to a question I have about Kim. So we talked about the skorts, and okay. So I'm sorry, the word skort is just funny.
The word, I was gonna say, literally, the word makes me laugh.
So all of a sudden, we go from seeing in maybe one of the first seasons where you took the little kids, which we call the children of the corn, because they all these kids of blonde hair, and when you would come to the house, it would be like the Minions on the Minions movie when they like there's that meme where they like look up at the screen and they all at the same time go, "Oh."
Oh, yeah.
That's what they would do when you guys would come to the house, like, "Oh," because it's like they never went anywhere, they never saw anybody else, so when outside people would come in, they would all just barefoot, all the little blonde heads run to the door. So, okay, so you guys, gave them ice cream and sweet tea. I don't know, it's something very sinful. But now on the show, we've got full on um Amber goes over to Kim's single girl apartment in the city and goes over and she's like, let me make you some coffee. And now everybody's drinking coffee. Everybody's drinking kombucha. And Kim's out here drinking margaritas. Like, it's
Ironically
got to
enough,
be.
way back in like the first season, it was not even Ethan and I that bought the ice cream and took it over to the farm. That was Micah. Because I
But
was like,
he seems to get a pass for everything.
he does get a pass. But I was like, I'm not doing that. Like if Kim has agreed to let the kids come to my home and they're hungry in my home and they find food in the fridge and it has sugar in it, I'm not about to like throw out all the food in my house that has sugar in it. But
Yeah,
if I'm going to her house, I'm not going to bring that into her house unless it's something I'm personally like eating or drinking when I'm, arriving or something.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
didn't even buy them ice cream in season one. That's like a common misconception where people are like, remember when Olivia broke her boundary and took them sugar? I'm like, that was not me. That was literally Micah. I was not even a part of that.
Yeah. 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 I mean, and then they would just like go out of town and leave the kids. And then, like, even on the show now, it seems like Barry has a full time job and goes to work. Kim's out doing whatever she's doing. And then the three little kids are at home because Isaac's out there living his hot girl summer. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he's out there with girlfriends and kissing chicks and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And
Yeah.
could you believe this last episode when Kim and Isaac stood there and she was talking to him about safe sex and he's 16 years old?
I mean,
I couldn't believe it.
I actually could because she never talked to Ethan about it until the night before his wedding.
Well, she
So
assumes
16.
that you guys are not having premarital sex because that would be a sin. So she's assuming Isaac is having premarital sex and now it's fine. Would it have been
Yeah,
fine for Hosanna? You know?
I don't know. She also always got a pass. I don't know. I've given up trying to understand things because there's no consistency
Okay.
across the board. There's zero consistency in like why the rules were made and who they applied to. Um, Even if they were applied to all the kids, she got a pass. I remember like right, you saw like how Lydia dressed in season one and like how Moriah got kind of judged for her clothing choices.
Yeah.
And like for years, even when they dressed much more conservatively than they did when the show started, I would some like Kim would still be outside in like a bikini or something, but all the girls had to wear like prairie dresses. So like there's never been consistency in what the rules were or why the rules were there. I think a
Hmm.
lot of it was I think a lot of the rules that were made, um, and I actually know this for a fact because Kim would say this, and the kids have told me this. Um, some of the rules that were made were literally because Kim didn't have self control in that area and couldn't see things happening in front of her. So, for example, like a lot of the no sugar, it's because she
Mhm.
wouldn't have self control around that kind of food. So she had to ban it from everyone. Or if
Mhm.
she went on like a diet, everyone had to go on this green diet or whatever because she'd be like, I can't
Mhm.
see you guys eat that food in front of me. So I think a lot of the rules that she made, such as no alcohol, is because she lacked self control. And
Mhm.
she needed everyone to abide by that for her, to abide by it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So again, there's not consistency. I don't understand it. And I just go, okay, she's always kind of made her own rules and I don't need to be a part of that.
Well, speaking of the alcohol, do you have any insight, or do you have at the very least an opinion on why her DUI was not addressed at all on the show? I don't know the timeline of the filming. I think that perhaps the DUI happened before you started filming, maybe when you guys, or when you, I don't know. But so speak on that, because people are up in arms about that, because that's not fair to make all this other stuff and then she gets a pass on something she did.
Yeah. You can't film what no one talks about. So if no one brings it up and no one talks about it in an effort to protect her, then it's not going to be covered. I
Okay,
mean, the
so
same way the same way that you could ask me a question in this interview and I could decline to answer, and then is it actually
yeah.
covered? If she was asked any questions about it, all the kids wanted to kind of protect her in that. Um, I think that's why, honestly, the social media post was the big blow up it was, is because that happened over the summer. And I think that, like, with their world turned completely upside down, it was just a mad scramble to kind of protect her. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, if none of them talked about it, it can't be filmed.
I don't know when that happened, though. Did that happen over the summer, the DUI?
Yes, yes, while we were in
And then you
Europe.
guys started filming right after
Yes,
Europe.
yes.
So technically, you could have brought it up because you're on the
I
show.
mean, yeah, but again, like, why sling dirt? I think I looked at
Mhm.
it as like before filming ever started for last season, I became very aware of all the things that were being said about me. I had things like the kids' car accidents blamed on me. Literally everything was just like, it's Olivia's fault. And at that point, I was like, I'm not talking about like this family and all these problems. Like,
Yeah.
all that's going to look like is slinging dirt back and forth. I'm going to let them just like talk about whatever they want to talk about. It's probably going to be me. They're probably going to blame everything on me. It's going to reflect on them. And listen, I just want out of this dysfunction so bad. I didn't know that I was like going to walk out of my marriage at that point, but I think
Mhm.
looking back, it was the first telltale sign that I was just so done with the dysfunction.
When you were in Europe with Ethan, did you feel like if we could just stay in this bubble, our marriage will be okay? Or did you feel like this definitely is just a Band-Aid for now?
That's a very interesting question because by all accounts, our time in Europe was not rosy.
Mm.
It was not a bubble. Um, it was actually pretty horrible. We fought nonstop the entire time. While we were in Europe, Ethan told me that our marriage was over. And I, for some reason, looked at him and was like, you don't get to tell me that. Like, please get your ass in therapy. Like, you don't just get to walk out because I
Yeah.
vote for abortion. Like,
Right.
we got to deal with these things. And looking back, like, maybe I should have listened to him then. But we did not want his family to know we were in such a rocky place because they were so involved. So coming back from Europe, him going to Cairo and working on his cars for a few months and being around his family all the time and starting to film the show, we decided that like we just need a really united front. Because at that time, his family was saying a whole lot of stuff about me to literally anyone who would listen, writing letters to people. They didn't want me on the show, all this stuff. So we just decided to have a very united front. And I was also looking at it as like, if I'm not 100% supportive of him just taking off and going and living in Cairo for a few months, my marriage is going to be over. So I guess I
Mhm.
just need to be supportive and not say anything. And maybe this is a compromise I can make. It was all very confusing. But we were not in a great place. That was 100% a united front to, um, yeah, I guess try a new tactic to like not let his family meddle in our marriage. But it was, I think,
Yeah.
already kind of over at that point. As we moved to Minnesota, and within just a few months, it ended.
Well, I do at least like the fact that he did. join with you and said we're going to have a united front while we figured out for ourselves. My family doesn't need to be involved. Obviously,
Mhm.
they love to, make a black screen of death post on social media. So I do like that he respected your marriage and what you had in your relationship enough to say, I'm going to have a united front with her and you're not going to
Yeah.
talk about my wife. That's nice that he didn't just join back with his family and just throw you under the bus. Like, you're right. Olivia is the downfall of all of us. Probably
Yeah.
she caused that DUI, even though we were in Europe. I mean,
Yeah, you never know, maybe I did.
people really, that really is a disservice to the show that it wasn't shown, I think, because it
Yeah.
really, because even if you want to make it a redemption arc, or I learned from my lesson, or maybe I realized that, like what you said, maybe I don't have self-control with alcohol. A lot of it can be turned into a positive. It could be a learning thing, but it was just act like it never happened when it was like literally on the news, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting, because alcohol played a big role in Ethan and I's relationship at the end as well, and
In what way though?
in the way that he
In,
used alcohol to cope.
okay.
And there's a lot of negative side effects for using alcohol to cope. At
Oh,
that
yeah,
time,
yes,
I
there
was like,
is.
at that
Yeah.
time, I was like, yeah, I think I want to learn bartending. It'd be fun. And then I very quickly walked away because I was like, I don't know how to work in a bar and like serve all these people, predominantly in a sports bar, men, alcohol, wondering if their wife is at home feeling the same way that I feel um,
Yeah.
in their
Yeah.
marriage. Like, I just,
Mhm.
that feels so wrong to me. So I took a big step back. And I wondered the same thing for Ethan. Like, okay, so talk about it. Like, there's so many people who struggle with alcohol. If
Mhm.
you talk about your struggle with it, like you said, it could be a redemption arc. Just
Yeah,
not
yeah,
mentioning it at all
absolutely.
doesn't do anything because it still shows up on the news and here and there, and like literally
Yeah.
shows up in your body. People can tell like when you drink a lot of alcohol. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm also the kind of person that's like, it's just better to be honest and say everything up
Yeah.
front and admit something. And there's a lot more grace if you admit your faults than if you pretend it doesn't exist.
And as far as Barry goes, he seemed to be having a real dad of the year tried storyline. And that scene when they were in Malibu and Barry and Ethan are sitting on opposite ends of the couch, like kind of half facing away. The body language is so like, we know we have to have this conversation on camera, but it's so awkward. And Barry talking to Ethan about his own marriage, which is to Ethan's mother. It's just so inappropriate. You know what I mean? Like, well, in my own marriage, son, you should do that. I'm like, this is his mom. The whole thing. Now, I will be interested to see what happens with Barry. I will,
Yeah.
because he's it's so interesting. But it does seem like, from a viewer, that Kim was always the one that was sort of leading them down this path. And now that Barry's got a taste of freedom, like, what's he going to do? Or was it Barry's idea all along? Because I don't know about Barry's parents, or Ethan seemed to love them and they seem to love you, the ones in Minnesota.
Yeah, I am quite close to the extended family in Minnesota. Barry is nothing like them.
Mm.
Um,
So maybe Kim
I
pushed him into it.
I don't I don't know, honestly. I think that they were two people looking for something and they found it in each other and then decided to create a little bubble to raise their
Yeah.
kids in, to kind of not repeat any of the stuff that they didn't like about their childhoods.
And
And
Kim
look,
talking
I
about her
think
mother. Her mother was an alcoholic, and now
mhm.
Kim finds herself with a DUI.
Yeah, I think reactive parenting um, is a recipe for disaster, honestly. And I think
Mm,
that's also like one reason why I've not wanted to have kids yet is I'm like, there are so many things from my own childhood that I don't think I've processed enough that as a parent,
mhm.
I would be reactive. And I don't want to
Yeah,
be a reactive parent. I don't want to just do the opposite of whatever my parents did because it's the
right,
opposite. I want to be
right.
intentional. So yeah, I don't know. I know that in my interactions with Barry and Kim, Kim was the one that kind of called all of the shots and everyone just said yes to her. But in this past year with filming the new season and everything falling apart with the family, I know that Barry was a ringleader in saying a lot of really hurtful things about me, both publicly
Mhm,
and privately.
mhm.
So I don't really know. I don't really have a desire to have a relationship with either one of them, but I hope that they, I hope that they do well in life.
Well, some final thoughts on the season. I was really glad to see that Isaac seems to be sort of the first, and maybe Amber will be next, to be like, quote unquote, a normal teenager that just like has his truck and has his friends and does his thing and wants to go to college because he wants to achieve his goal of becoming a pilot. And he feels like he can't do that unless he goes to college. And he was just like, yeah, I guess I'll be the first one to go to college. I'm like, well, your parents went to college. And then he was the first one to like go for any higher learning. And I will be interested to see how someone like Isaac, who has this homeschooling, which doesn't seem like did the Plath kids any favors with the homeschooling, how he will acclimate to college and that kind of environment. It's very hard for sheltered kids to go to. I mean, any kid I knew that had no relationship with alcohol, was ever allowed to have pizza. They go the opposite direction when they get to college. They have some freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting. At least Isaac, some of that bubble's been lifted from him. At least has a little more freedom and can look at his cell phone and stuff like that. But it will be interesting
Yeah,
about as far as the educational aspect for him.
it will be very interesting. I mean, I hope that those kids do well, and I hope they get to pursue what they're really interested in.
Yeah.
Um, it's definitely interesting. Like, I don't keep in contact with them, the younger kids, and I don't pretend to know everything going on in their life, but I know enough to know that there are almost no especially for Isaac, no restrictions. He's already like kind of gone the other way, and
Mm.
it'll be very interesting to see him kind of figure that out, find his balance.
Yeah, you could tell that Amber, when she was drinking that coffee over at Kim's apartment, that she was giving Kim the stink eye the entire time Kim was talking. She was looking at her like, "Oh, really? Now you've got this boy, really?" I mean,
Well,
I
I
was
mean,
like,
they already
Amber,
all
Amber's the
knew.
breakout star.
They already all knew. She'd been seeing him for a long time.
Yeah, it's interesting to a lot of people that do the deep dives are like, "Oh, Ken was on their social media like as a family friend a long time ago."
Hmm.
Yeah, interesting. What was no, I won't even say that. That's terrible. I won't say it. Okay, so we don't know what Mike is doing. We don't know if he's still promoting his modeling career, LA, Miami. We don't know.
I mean, he moved out of LA back to Florida, but that's about all I know.
And what about Lydia's boyfriend now? Do you know anything about
I
that person?
I do not know anything now.
How old is Lydia?
20?
20. Let's see. I have a chart. Let's
Yeah,
see.
I think she's 20.
Yeah, her birthday is in February, so she'd be 20. Or maybe she's 2004. No, so she's 19. Her birthday's
Oh,
2004. So in February she'll be 20. So coming up.
okay.
That's
Yeah.
what my chart says. That's what my chart says. Um, and then I said, has Amber reached out to you now that she has a cell phone? Because we love
No.
Amber.
No, I know she would not be allowed, and I don't even know if there's a desire there.
Do you have some brief thoughts on Lydia's singing?
Um, no, I haven't really listened to it. It's not really my style, what I choose to listen to, but you know,
Okay. Okay. And what about Mariah's new hit single that she's put out that's about you?
I listened to maybe like 30 seconds of it because, like, that's someone's burn book song about you. You kind of got to know what they're saying.
Yeah, right, right.
Um, but again, I I don't know if I should do this, but I had a little laugh.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's like, is it a song by who? Like, is it Mariah Carey or Britney Spears? I don't know. I don't claim to know the pop world. It's like that song, "Why You So Obsessed with Me."
Yeah.
Who sings that?
I don't know. It may be like Olivia Rodrigo or somebody. I'm not sure.
But you know what I'm talking about. There's a song like "Why You So Obsessed with Me," and
Hmm.
that's what came to mind. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Well, okay. So tell everybody what's next for you. Now, you said on an AMA the other day on Instagram that you do believe there is going to be a new season because maybe you're already filming for it.
If there's another season, I know I'd be on it. Ethan and I like said we were going our separate ways end of last season, but obviously there's you know, that wasn't the end. There's still stuff to play out of like figuring out a divorce and everything.
Yes.
Um, so, and I know that people loved my sister and I hanging out
Yeah.
together.
Yes.
So Yeah, that's what I'll say. As far as right now, I'm
Okay.
living in LA, and honestly, I feel like I'm doing so well. It's actually funny because in recent months, I've looked at my life and been like, my life feels kind of boring. Like it's so peaceful now, and the chaos and the
Yeah.
drama is gone that it actually feels a little bit boring. But that's good. I got way too used to living in chaos and drama all the time.
Yeah.
I've had so much fun meeting new friends. I've started learning to surf. I read a
Oh,
whole stack
wow.
of books this summer, did some personal travel, still working, figuring out what life looks like as a single lady.
Okay. I love it. So you have like lots of friends out there and you're still doing your
Yeah.
photography? Yeah.
Yeah. I knew some people out here and I've made some new friends since I moved here. So honestly, I feel like at this point, I'm just open to whatever life throws at me, trying it all, seeing what fits. I know that I'm not going to live in LA permanently, but it was a good temporary spot to just sit here while I figure out what to do next.
So you went to California and it didn't just jade you and all the gay people didn't try to come and get you like Barry and Kim had
No,
predicted.
no, I'm still waiting to see those gay people that are going to get me. So far, I've only met the really, really nice ones.
Oh my God, it's so funny. Well, when we're done with this, don't hang up. But when we're done, I'm gonna ask you some Europe questions. But
Okay.
everybody, you could follow Olivia on Instagram at Olivia Marie Plath. You could follow me at Pink Shade Pod. And again, if you want to hear the recaps that we have done since season 1 of Plathville, it is over on Prime, Pink Shade Prime, and the links are in the show notes and all that. And thank you, Olivia. Don't hang up because I got some Europe questions for you.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
Ads not read by me, Mary Payne, don't necessarily reflect the views of Pink Shade. If you'd like to listen to ad-free, you're going to go on over to Supercast or Patreon, and you can find the links to Pink Shade Prime at pinkshadepodcast.com.